Welcome to the Northern Arizona Real Estate Podcast. Today I am joined by the one and only David Morse, CEO of Keller Williams Arizona Realty, amongst two other brokerages in Arizona?
We have a couple others. Yeah, Keller Williams Realty Elite and Keller Williams Southern Arizona. The one and only, though.
One and only David Morse.
That's very kind of you.
I'm honored that you're on my podcast, man. You are an actual podcaster. So I'm still working on my first 10 episodes. And how many episodes deep are you?
170? 175? I don't know.
You passed the century mark. So you're a podcaster.
I guess I can claim that. And I will say that in the real estate brokerage space, there were not a lot of real estate brokerage leaders that were doing podcasting 4 or 5 years ago when we started. I did take about a year and a half off last year and have just started to get back into it. But man, it's fun to have conversations with cool people. So,
yeah. So let's do a shameless plug for you then. So
all right.
If you don't know David Morse, go check out Real Talk with David Morse on your favorite podcasting platforms.
Yeah, whatever one you can find it out there, from YouTube to Spotify, TuneIn, all the deals.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Today we're going to dive into mainly the topic around picking your brain as a CEO of a real estate brokerage in Arizona. You are not a licensed realtor in Arizona, correct?
Nope, I am not.
But you were a licensed realtor in a different state before moving to Arizona.
I sure was. Yeah, I was a licensed agent for several years. Ran Keller Williams in the state of Maine for a few years. We took that to the third most profitable KW brokerage in the world. And then we kind of looked up. I have a family, and we said, where do we want to go next? That's when we came out to Arizona in 2020. And yeah, I do not compete with our agents as a licensed agent. So literally 100% of my time is devoted to helping our agents succeed and take market share.
Awesome. And I'm one of your agents. So.
And you are one of my agents, one of my partners.
One of your partners. Yeah, if you didn't know, so that's, I got to just disclaimer now, I work with David
How long have we been in business together now? 3? Is it 3 years now?
22.
All right. So we're working on 3.
3, yeah. Almost 3 years.
It's awesome, man.
So,
yeah. We're proud to have you representing Northern Arizona.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here. So anyways, let's dive into picking your brain. So a couple things we're going to go over today is going to be your thoughts and your perspective on market trends and insights here in Arizona, some advice that you have for buyers and sellers. Okay. I'm going to give some insights out of you as the CEO of a brokerage instead of being a realtor. Okay. So you're going to have a little bit different perspective than someone like myself would. Yep. And then stick around for the end because we're going to have our first ever lightning round on the pod. Oh. And I think it's going to be a fun one.
All right. Sounds good. I'm looking forward to it, man. Yeah. Put me in the hot seat.
Yeah. So let's dive in. What are the key trends you're seeing in the real estate market right now?
Yeah, I think anytime we're talking about the real estate industry, we got to go macro to micro and then micro back out to macro. And so a couple of the things that we're seeing as an industry is that the actual annual supply of units that will transfer is very akin to what we saw last year. We're projecting that probably 4.2 million units will move throughout the United States, meaning buyers and sellers will transfer ownership of about 4.2 million homes. Mm-hmm. That's the macro lens. When we go down micro, what's very interesting, Brent, is that macro trend is holding similar in most of our local markets and even in our statewide market. When we talk about like a balanced market, what we mean by that is that there's generally 6 months of inventory that's available for purchase. And what we've seen over the last 90 days in most markets, and Prescott included, or the Prescott area included, is that we've seen this upward trajectory by 15, 20, 25% in some areas in available supply. Mm-hmm. And so we've moved from probably 3 months of supply up into this almost 4 months of supply. And as we then go very micro into the different areas, and you and I were talking about this before going on air, you really are actually seeing us coming even closer to that balanced market, okay, where sellers are not fully in the driver's seat as maybe they were in times past, in months and years past, right? And so what that does is it gives the buyer a little bit more negotiating power at the table. And that's an exciting place to be for a lot of consumers. consumers, right? There's a lot of interest rate. We'll probably talk about some of these things, but the buyer, I think, can have a little bit more confidence right now, not in all areas, but a little bit more confidence than maybe they have in the last maybe 6 to 12 months.
Yeah. So with that, speaking directly to buyers and sellers here in Northern Arizona, would you say that I guess what I'm gathering from you is that we're coming out of a seller's market and heading towards more of a neutral market? Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, I think in most of our towns and our cities, especially in Northern Arizona, our inventory has not been as plentiful. And so really, what does that do? Well, when we're talking supply and demand, if I'm a buyer and I only have 10 homes in my desired area to look at, okay, well, I really don't have much negotiating power. As the inventory increases and I have more options, I can approach that conversation with my agent and from agent to agent quite differently, right? And so, yeah, as we move a little bit away from a seller's market, more towards a balanced market, and in some, I mean, we talked about this too. I mean, there's some where it has actually flipped. Southern Arizona, for example, is in a buyer's market.
Oh, wow.
Blanket. Southern Arizona is in a buyer's market. The Phoenix metro and the valley, there's only 3 towns or cities that are still in a seller's market. The rest of them are all in buyer's markets. So that same thing is happening in Northern Arizona as well, which is good news for our buyers. But it also means that our sellers have to face reality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you think that's going to do to home prices?
That is a good question. I don't see that we are going to have such a glut of inventory hit the market that prices are going to massively decrease, right? We may not appreciate at quite the same rate that we've been experiencing in the last couple of years, but we're not going to see a fall off in prices. So buyers also should not be in my opinion, they should not feel so pompous that oh, I can come into this house and get this at bottom dollar.
Yeah.
That's not what we mean by any means. And on the flip side, Brent, sellers should remain confident that, hey, I can get a reasonable price for my home, but they also, my encouragement, they have got to listen to their agent. They have got to trust their agent when it comes to pricing. Okay, the number that you see on Zestimate or the number that you perhaps could have gotten in 2022 is not the same number that you're going to get in 2025. And you just have to come to grips with that, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, we're seeing a lot of sellers not coming to grips with that at the initial meeting. And then after being on market for 2 months, 3 months, finally coming to grips with that.
Yeah, and by that
some of them aren't though, and they're expiring and they're just pulling the houses off market and not selling.
Yeah, and by that point, man, it's just too late.
Yeah.
I mean, we know that there's very few things that affect the price of a home in a negative way, and one of those is the time that a seller spends on market. And so when your agent is explaining these market dynamics to you and saying, hey, we need to come in aggressively priced, here's the thing I know, and that any experienced agent knows, you cannot underprice a property. The market will dictate and bring that property up to its appropriate value.
Yeah.
It always will.
Yep. Yeah, because if you underprice enough, we are still seeing bidding wars on some houses here in the area, especially the houses in the sub 350 price point.
Definitely.
So,
and that's another dynamic too, is trust your agent when it comes to pricing dynamics within a specific spectrum or specific range.
So with all that into consideration, what would be one piece of advice, if you could just give one piece of advice to a buyer right now in this market, what would that be?
To a buyer, I would ask your agent to explain to you or get you connected with a lending professional that can explain to you the power of buy downs. It's probably a terminology that you've heard thrown around as a buyer, or maybe not if it's your first time in the market. But there you have powerful tools available to you that, if used and leveraged appropriately, create a win for the seller on the other side of the table, okay, and create a win for you as the buyer that maximize your buying power.
Yeah.
And so that is my piece of advice. If your agent is not talking to you about tools like that, then your agent is probably not the person that you should be trusting right now.
Yep.
And that's why I love, the clients and consumers that do business with agents like you, Brent, is because I know that you add that type of value in consultation to the whole experience.
Another shameless plug. If you haven't watched it last week, go back to last week's episode of the pod with Greg Riordan, where we talk about creative ways to get your payment down, including buy downs.
There we go.
So
love it.
All right. Commercial over. Back in the hot seat. Now the same question, but apply it to sellers. So what one piece of advice do you have for sellers in the current market?
You know, what's funny is I am actually going to say the exact same thing. When we think about sellers, as a seller, I'm going to use the analogy of putting your bait into a pond. Okay. And some people listening to this may be fishermen, they may not be. I'm actually not a fisherman, but I understand this concept. When you cast your bait, the deeper that you get your bait into the water, potentially gives you the most opportunities to get a bite. Okay. And what I want a seller to hear in this is that when you utilize something like a buy down and you actually attract buyers, you educate your listing agent is doing their job to educate buyers, you're actually attracting more potential buyers to the equation. So I'm going to give the exact same piece of advice to sellers. Talk to your agent about buy downs and creative ways to attract buyers. Mm-hmm. And I think that same thing applies to both sides of the table, because anytime we're doing a transaction, it involves both parties. It involves both parties' agents, and it involves coming to a win-win arrangement.
Yep. On that topic, I actually have a listing on the market right now where we verified with their lender that they have an FHA loan that's assumable, and I believe they're at like a 2.99 rate.
Wow.
So we put the text in the listing description.
There you go.
Ask about, a mortgage. I can't remember the name of it. Not an overtake, but what do you... assumption.
Like an assumption,
yep.
Yeah.
Ask your agent about a mortgage assumption.
Yeah.
So, but I didn't say the rate or anything in the description because I'm not the bank, so I'm not the one to approve them for the 299. But hey, that's something that we have done differently to set our listing apart.
I mean, think about that though. If I'm coming to the table, and we know affordability can be a challenge for some buyers in this market, right? And you are looking at and locking 6 and 6.5 and 7% rates on any given day, and you have the ability to take over something at a 2.9. I mean, that drastically changes your buying power. It drastically changes your payment, and that is like, this gets me excited, man, because like this is like where we're truly can like be an expert and serve the consumer, right? I mean, not to get off on a tangent about this, but like you can save someone $300, $400, $500 on their monthly payment. That literally changes that household's ability to do other things with that money, to save for the future. And that has real life implications for families. And I just think that's why you need to work with an educated, trusted professional.
So let's dive into that more. Since you just said that,
since I just opened that can of worms.
Since you just opened that that door, let's just dive head first through it. So, why is it crucial for buyers and sellers to work with an experienced real estate agent rather than doing things themselves?
I am not ashamed to say that the barrier of entry to this industry is very low. Okay. There are a lot of people who got into this business to work their own transaction. There's a lot of people who get into this business with these high hopes of making easy money. The fact of the matter is the current industry landscape and the changes that maybe consumers have seen in the headlines out there, what it's doing is it's flushing out poor agents. And so what it's also doing by doing that is it's allowing people like you, Brent, to rise to the top and truly come in as a consultant, right? Mm-hmm. If someone is purchasing arguably the biggest asset of their lives, okay, in most families' cases, then they deserve to be represented by someone who has their best interests in mind. And so I think whether you're purchasing a home or you're selling a home, it's crucial that your agent is experienced, educated, and comes primarily from a place of integrity.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you any more than that.
Yeah.
On those topics. Another thing too is to double down on that. What questions should people be asking when they're interviewing potential agents?
Yeah,
if you could give just three quick, what are the top three quick questions someone should be asking their potential agent?
Yeah, I think one of the questions that I would ask, I would not ask how long your agent has been in the business. Okay. Instead, I would ask, how many transactions have you done? How many families have you worked with? Okay. That I think is a much better indicator than the years that they've been in business, right? You're laughing because you know that to be true.
Because there's a ton of agents out there that have been in the business for 10 to 15 years and done 2 deals a year.
Yeah.
So that's 2 deals a year over a 15-year career is only 30 transactions.
Yeah, definitely.
Like,
and
there's agents in our office that do more than 30 transactions annually.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
and so
that's why I'm laughing.
When you start to see that amount of like deal flow, you start to just you understand what the buyer or seller is going through, right? And so that's super important. A second quick question that I would ask is, what are you going to do for me different than agent B? Okay, and start to understand like what it is that force that agent to share their value proposition with you. Okay. I think it's very important. Here's the reality, and maybe this is the first time that a buyer or seller listening to this has heard this, but you're not hiring the agent to help you find a home. Frankly, let me let you in on a secret. You can go do that by yourself. You can in this market. You're hiring on both sides of the transaction, whether you're buying or selling, for the negotiating ability of that agent. You're hiring them for the exposure and marketing ability. Brent, I think that's one of your superpowers, is your ability to expose a property in a different light. Mm-hmm. That is powerful because ultimately you need attention and eyeballs to sell a property.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what are they going to do that's different than agent B? The third question that I would ask, and this might be kind of like, whoa, that's kind of weird. I would ask them what their professional fee is. Mm-hmm. And I think you should understand what the professional fee for their services is right up front.
Yeah.
And we train our agents to defend their value and show that value to the consumer, and how at the end of the day, that value is going to help that buyer or seller either save more money on the buy side or net more money as a seller.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
Yeah. So those would be the 3 I'd ask.
Yeah, let's go a second question deep on your number 2. Okay. So you said specifically, what sets your agent apart, or the agent apart from others. Let's go like another level deep on that and say, what sets Keller Williams Arizona Realty apart from other brokerages in Northern Arizona?
Awesome. Yeah, I think we are privileged to be in business with agents that are seasoned. The majority of our agents have either been in the business themselves and seen and worked many dozens of transactions. And even if they're newer in the business, what I love is that we are composed as a brokerage primarily of teams that represent hundreds of deals as well, right? And so whether the time in the market is a year for some agents or 25 years, okay, our agents are exposed to dozens, hundreds of deals. So I think that's one thing. On the exposure perspective as well, not only is Keller Williams the largest real estate company in the world, giving more attention and eyeballs to your property than any other company, but also from a statewide perspective, we are the largest family of Keller Williams offices in the state, and we function like that. And so we give the ability for buyers and sellers in this market to be exposed to far more properties. We have a large amount of off-market properties that can only be accessed by our agents. We have a large network of agents. Now, I heard this interesting statistic that has rung true for years. The average person purchasing in Northern Arizona comes from the Phoenix Valley. It's still the number one place. 50%.
I believe it.
The way that Keller Williams Arizona Realty is structured, we are in constant dialogue and communication and have the ability to work as one unit across the state. And so I believe that something that we possess that other brokerages here in the local market don't necessarily possess is that ability and the benefit of the scale of our company, the number of agents, the number of listings, and our ability to get that in front of as many potential buyers as possible.
Yeah. And an example of that is, I'm an agent here in Northern Arizona. I have sold down in Phoenix, but that's not my expertise. And I'm going to tell potential buyers that like right away, but I do have multiple referral partners down there, and they're in our different offices.
I love it.
So, I've got 3 off the top of my head that I send deals to down there in the Phoenix area that without leaving the brokerage.
Yeah.
And those agents and amongst other agents reciprocate the business and it's like, hey, I got a client from the Valley that wants to live in Northern Arizona. I don't want to come up the hill. I'm not a part of the Prescott area MLS. I'm not a part of Northern Arizona, which is the Flagstaff MLS. So they're like, I don't have access to those here. Just, we'll figure it out later. So
I love that.
That's one of the cool benefits about being a part of this brokerage specifically is that we have that link without leaving the brokerage. Clients wise, we just work together as a team and refer and take care of our clients.
Yeah.
Thank you throughout not just the Valley and up here, but also through, Southern Arizona as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, for sure. Let's shift gears a little bit. I want to get your perspective on a couple things. We're going to call this the CEO Perspective Corner. So what are the biggest challenges and opportunities that you see in the real estate industry today?
The biggest challenges and opportunities in the industry today.
If you could just narrow it down to one.
Narrow it down to one.
One of each. Sorry. Biggest challenge, and then we'll do biggest opportunity.
I think the biggest, I'll go with the biggest opportunity first. And the biggest opportunity I see for agents today is that the best agents are going to continue to build very lucrative careers in this business and have the ability to help a lot of people. What we're seeing, Brent, in the industry is a continued concentration of the production at the top. What I mean by that is the top performers are controlling more and more of the market. And the consumer should be in favor of that because generally, to my point earlier, the agents that see more deal flow and are working more transactions are the ones who are most in general the experts. Okay, maybe I can give the example of the doctor. The doctor that's performed 500 heart surgeries is a lot more well equipped to handle the 501st heart surgery versus the surgeon who has the same credentials, maybe even has been in the business as long, but has only performed 25 heart surgeries.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't think anyone would argue that. Sometimes we don't think about it the same way, but we should. And so it's very important to be in business and do business with companies like ours, firms like ours, who have represented a large number of buyers and sellers in this region. So that's the biggest opportunity. I think the biggest challenge is going to be something that it's no different than in years and decades past. And that is, we are always, I want everyone listening to this to think of themselves as a consumer. I don't care whether you're a buyer or seller or an agent or anyone listening to this. We all consume, we all purchase, and we are always looking for the least resistance, right? The path of least resistance is generally the path that we're going to take. Okay. What I want the agent to think about is the consumer, the buyer and seller of today and the buyer and seller of 2030 is going to be looking for the path of least resistance. So you have to eliminate friction. You have to make the process easy. And that will be a challenge because you're competing against other talented agents who are constantly working on that same problem to create a better mousetrap. Mm-hmm. So I'd say that's probably the biggest challenge and things that an agent should be focusing on.
And on that token too, we're also competing against big tech.
Yeah.
That is gobbling up these littler businesses, ancillary businesses. Would that be a good way to put it? Like buying up like title and escrow companies, buying up signing software, buying up database software. I mean, we're not going to drop the Z-bomb, but you know what I'm talking about. So I'd say to that point too, we are also facing that challenge of that company acquiring other companies for end user ease.
I have a deeply held belief, Brent, that the agent will always remain at the center of the transaction. Mm-hmm. I believe in my heart of heart that the buyer and seller at least in our lifetimes will always default to that human connection. And so I don't get scared by tech. I instead say, we need to figure out how to leverage tech to make the experience easier for our buyers and seller. Yeah. And I think we'll be just fine.
Yeah, we can get into a whole other podcast episode just on that, but I'm aligned with you on that. I do think the agent will be agent centric for the transactions, but tech can definitely enable us on that aspect. Getting your perspective on another topic here before we have to go and wrap up. What advice do you have for aspiring real estate professionals out there?
My advice is you got to treat it like a business. We train our agents to come in day one and treat it like a business, come up with a business plan, set your intentions, and go to work. The agents that treat this like a part-time job aren't going to make it.
It's not a part-time job. I can't do one every other month.
I think in days
make it work.
I think in days gone by, you've been able to get away with that, and maybe it's been a great side career or side gig. Right? It's not, the industry will snuff you out.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to, like you said, with your heart surgery story, is if you're a part-time agent, your experience in number of units is going to be a lot less than someone who's in full-time.
Yep, exactly.
So, and that'll show.
Yeah, for sure.
So, one more question. Community involvement. How is our brokerage involved in the local community?
In the local community, it primarily shows up every year on May 8th. So that's coming up in a few months from this recording. We go out into the community. We shut down all of our offices globally, and we go out and serve the community through different community service projects. It could be a whole range of things. But we've done that for years and years, and it's not just a national thing, it's an international thing. It's a really neat opportunity. That's how we show up on an annual basis in a big way. And then I also love that we give the latitude to our agents and our teams to be involved in their local communities in the ways that are most meaningful to them as well. So we donate thousands of dollars into the local community, and we also contribute to the local economy in a huge way. People don't realize the number of transaction dollars that occur through a real estate transaction. And so in that way, we're also supporting small businesses and the local community simply by doing our job. And I think that's something that's often overlooked.
Yeah, great point. Let's enter the lightning round.
Oh,
you ready?
Oh.
We got some lightning round questions for you. So as short as answers as possible here. First one word to describe the current real estate market.
Fast.
Fair. Second question. If you were to buy a second home in Northern Arizona, where would it be and why?
It would be an A-frame in Prescott. And
awesome.
Why? Because I'm up here serving you guys and working with you guys a lot, and I'd love a place to have a second home.
Yeah. And if you didn't know, he's a Valley guy right now. So, if your career was made into a movie, what would be the title and who would play you?
Oh, man. I want to say Gladiator because it's my favorite film. But I don't think that has any...
Russell Crowe going to play you?
I'd take it. I'll take Russell Crowe in Gladiator.
He needs a little CGI, though, because he's got probably a good 30 to 40 years on you, dude.
Yeah, he does.
So, what is a surprising skill or hobby you have that people might not know about?
I build concrete furniture.
What?
I do. Yeah.
I didn't even know this.
That's my creative outlet. Yeah.
Wow.
A lot of the furniture in our home has a Scandinavian concrete design.
That's pretty rad.
Yeah.
Like you have molds and you make it like that?
I make my own molds. And
wow.
I do a couple pieces a year usually.
That's super impressive.
Oh,
dude, that's cool.
I just like playing in the mud. I've never grown up.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining today. And man, it was a pleasure having you.
Thanks for having me, man. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
I appreciate it. Appreciate all you do for our brokerage and clients up here.
High five.
All right.
Thank you so much for joining us today on the Northern Arizona Real Estate Podcast, where we were joined by David Morse, CEO of Keller Williams Arizona Realty. They have a brokerage based here out of Prescott, Arizona, downtown on Whiskey Row, 102 North Montezuma Street. The reason I know that is because it's the brokerage I am currently with. So shameless plug for us. Just pure transparency. David's awesome, and I am forever grateful for having him on today. I hope you found our conversation enlightening and you took some value away from it. If you did, please drop a comment below on what your favorite thing is that we talked about today, or the number one piece of advice that you took away from our conversation. If you haven't subscribed to the channel or to the podcast already, please hit that subscribe button so you can know when we launch episodes. I do attempt to make this a weekly thing, and I've been successful at it so far, but life happens sometimes. So anyways, I'm running long and I'll let you go. Thank you again so much for joining us this week, and I hope to see you again next week. Until then, stay rad.